Okay. So I believe we can now start. Good morning, everyone. I'm saying good morning from Nairobi, where we are seated. And welcome everyone who's joining us today for this lounge. I'm so excited to see you all here. My name is Everlyn Matiri. I work with Catholic Relief Services, and I'll be your moderator for today. We have close to 350 people that are joining the call who are registered for this event actually, and we are thrilled to see so much interest from all these people. I'm very happy to be here with you to officially launch the newest member of the Humanitarian Standards Partnership, which is the SEADS, the standards for supporting crop-related livelihoods in emergencies. Thank you so much to ICRC delegation for hosting us today. We are here in their offices in Nairobi. Juerg Eglin, the head of ICRC delegation for Somalia, will share a few words to get us started. Over to you, Juerg.
Thank you, and thank you for this introduction and a big warm welcome from my side as well to all of you. I'm very pleased and also honored to host such a workshop here in our delegation, and again in today's world, also virtually with many participants from afar. Yeah, would be nice to have you all here physically, but today's world ticks more like that. Yeah, but nevertheless, a few words from my side. I'm heading the ICRC delegation for Somalia. We are partly based here, and then, of course, a big part of our setup and structures are in Somalia, all over the country. The ICRC has been a very big player, a big humanitarian player for the last 30 years in Somalia. We have been very active throughout all these troubled years from the early 90s when the civil war was at its heights, through all the different periods, often loaded with conflict, with difficulties, with drought, and with a disturbance, until today, where we still find ourselves in a situation where humanitarian needs are massive, where humanitarian actors play a very crucial role in order to help the Somali people and help to kind of people to go about their lives and move on. ICRC, we have always done so, our approach in Somalia, and particularly today, on the principle of, on the strict principle of neutrality and independence. That's a term that is used by many humanitarian actors, but has quite a specific meaning in Somalia, where things are so polarized, where you have a very violent and extreme group out there with Al-Shabaab that is a big force. This group controls the large swaths of the country. They have influence over large numbers of populations, and these populations, unfortunately, are often in the worst type of situations, are in most need of humanitarian assistance. So a big challenge for us, and we want to play this role a bit in parallel, if you want, to the humanitarian community that is by virtue mainly focusing on areas that can be accessed. They're also very populated, more urban areas controlled by the government, supported by the African Union, but there's still a big space out there, and you try to push those boundaries and work independently and neutral. Nevertheless, that doesn't prevent us from engaging with partners, also at the political level, security level, and also at the technical level, like today in that workshop. We want to be part of those joint efforts to improve humanitarian responses and to be on top of the game, also in partnership with more technical entities, but also more operational entities working in Somalia and beyond. Of course, I talk here mainly about Somalia. For us, it has always been a dilemma where we set a cursor between more emergency type of work, emergency response type of work, pure relief work, versus more resilience programming, longer term involvement, the famous nexus, if you want, and all engagement that take us beyond the immediate today. This is a long debate which has gone a long way. Personally, I was involved in that in a much simpler way in the past. Again, ICRC, we started decades ago as really as a pure relief type of responder, in addition to what we do on international humanitarian law, the Geneva Convention. But more on the assistance side, we started off as a purely relief responders. I was among the first agronomists in the ICRC in the early 90s, starting to develop these programs, working with communities in the agriculture sector, with the livestock sector, and beyond. Water was also a big issue, of course, health anyway. But we started to push a bit the boundaries, that cursor that was initially set for us very much on the emergency response type of activities towards more resilience, longer-term planning. We set up seed programs, tool programs, engagement with livestock owners, trainings and so on. But initially this was seen as something we shouldn't get too much involved in. Luckily, over the years, we have evolved and seen the importance that we have these kind of responses right from the beginning of a crisis, where we look at the long term and also equip ourselves with tools, with expertise, with technical people, and we have come in that sense quite a long way. And but at the end of it, we do still struggle when it comes now to my position as a head of delegation, where we put our resources, where we set the cursor, how much we attribute to resilience type of programs, and how much we keep for emergency response. These are not decisions we take easily, and they're not decisions that are just come like that. These are often driven by circumstances. What we see currently in Somalia with a drought is fighting very hard. In addition, we also have this offensive and the dimension of conflict that again affects many people. Hence, we are forced or driven again more looking at emergency type of programs. Mainly these days, mainly cash distribution. We have steered away a lot as ICRC from food distribution, but cash is now a tool that we are using. Again, we don't like it too much, but the circumstances dictate us in this direction. With this, I just want to say a few words, and also just to underline how important it is that we have this technical engagement, what you're doing here with this workshop, that we work on standards, that we improve on our technical capabilities to respond and do more good and avoid doing harm, especially when it comes to delicate issues like crop production, like seed varieties, seed issues. There was a big debate in Kenya just lately with a genetically modified crop coming into the country. These are all themes that are important, and I'm glad we have a panel of experts around the table tackling those issues. So these are just a few words from my side to introduce the workshop. I wish you good discussions, and hope everybody learns and takes away something positive. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Juerg, for those opening remarks. We have a number of panelists here. I'll be introducing them later, but I just want to talk a bit from the CRS perspective. We've been anticipating the SEADS for some time. In CRS, we work in over 115 countries. We reach over 9 to 10 million farmers per year, and we are supporting them with innovative ways for these smallholder farmers to be able to increase their crop as well as livestock production and improve access to finance and link farmers to markets. We work with this vulnerable population, just as Juerg has said, in the continuum of emergency to development activities, and we seek to enable these vulnerable households and communities to plan for and to cope with recurrent shocks by providing them with assets when disaster strikes, and then enabling farmers to build essential skills, use innovative technologies, and facilitate links to market and local systems so that they can establish sustainable and resilient trajectories along this pathway to prosperity that we commonly use within CRS. As part of this work, we support a range of emergency to development examples, and one of them is in the area of seed system strengthening, where CRS is leading a big Feed the Future global activity that is supporting seed systems for development, what we commonly call the S34D. And this is a 5-year project which is aiming to improve functioning of the national seed sector in focus countries by analyzing and providing recommendations to strengthen formal, informal, and emergency seed systems in ways that are sustainably increases farmer access to quality seeds for improved varieties. To support more sustainable outcomes, CRS is also working at the agency level to increase our market system strategies with approaches that cut between or across the emergency and development operations. In this work, we are finding ways to crowd in the private sector rather than crowd it out, and finding ways to enable communities to work together and find more sustainable solutions to addressing issues of poverty. Given our changing role, CRS is excited, very excited about the launch of the SEADS Handbook, as the approaches being promoted by SEADS also emphasize the need for critical analysis of the context and the appreciation of the role of the private sector that the private sector can play in providing solutions to both humanitarian and development outcomes, rather than defaulting to free distributions. The findings and advice in the handbook provides us with another step along the way to help CRS design, implement more effective and more sustainable, as well as scalable solutions. We recognize the efforts in developing these standards that have been very, very collaborative, with hundreds of individuals and dozens of people and organizations around the world, helping in a variety of ways, some of them being within the steering group, others within the field team members, contributing evidence, reviewing the handbook, and commenting on the draft, and participating in the various simulation events that this process has had. When you dig into the book, you'll find that it reflects the collective wisdom of the literature and the field-tested knowledge. Just before we go in, I wanted to give a few housekeeping. We will start with our panel, who's here with me. And we have 4 speakers lined up, who I will introduce in a moment. As your questions rise as they speak, please go ahead and pop them into the Q&A section, and we'll have around 30 minutes at the end to get to your questions. If you need technical support, we have Anne Randy, who's on the call, and you can chat her to help you along. Please do not put your questions in the chat, only put them in the Q&A. And we'll be monitoring the Q&A as we go along, so that we have a session at the end to answer these questions. Now, I am so delighted to introduce 4 members of this panel. And the first one is the ones whose picture is next to mine, is Ugo Bernieri, who is the regional agronomist with the ICRC, and also a member of the SEADS steering group. The second one is Loise Gichuhi. She is a thematic leader for education in emergencies at the University of Nairobi, and the country focal person for the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies here in Kenya. Nice to have you, Loise. The third one is Morena Bassan, who is a nutritionist like myself, and she's the regional nutritionist with the ICRC. Nice to have you, Morena. And last but not least is Salih Mageed, who is the Director General of SOS Sahel, Sudan, and also a member of the SEADS steering group. Welcome and karibu sana. In Kenya, we say karibu sana. Saleh, nice to have you in Kenya. I also have Guido Govoni, who's the regional livestock specialist, seated with us here. And he'll be talking later, also contributing to this discussion. And we're happy to have you, Guido, in the room. So thank you so much. So at this time, I want to hand over to Ugo, who will give us more information on this SEADS standards. And over to you, Ugo.
Thank you very much, Everlyn. Yes, as you mentioned, I've been with SEADS, collaborating with the SEADS project from the very beginning of this experience. We plan to have 2 years of meetings around the world developing the SEADS handbook. Unfortunately, at the end, because of COVID, this has been mostly an exercise performed from remote. So it's nice that today we meet again face to face. So I'm going to briefly walk through the handbook. And so, first of all, the definition that is how the SEADS has been defined, and you will find this definition inside the handbook. SEADS is defined as a set of evidence-based international principles and minimum standards that support the design, the implementation, and the evaluation of crop-related responses. In practical terms, SEADS will help to determine if in a given crisis context a crop-related response, a food production response it will be useful and feasible. And at this point, once you reach the first level of decision, you decide that you should go for a crop-related response. SEADS helps you to prioritize which type of response you can provide through your operation. And once you select your intervention area and the operation is ongoing, SEADS will follow you tracking the alignment of this project with the minimum standard provided. And then at the end, SEADS will help you to measure the impact of your operation in a way that is particularly oriented to monitor the livelihood impact of your operation. So next one, please. SEADS is the newly arrived member of the Humanitarian Standard Partnership Group. And SEADS is feeling a critical gap, because we have seen arriving in this group, for example, LEGS several years in advance compared to SEADS. LEGS is the livestock standard here represented by Guido. And so it was quite strange not to have a standard organized and launched for the agricultural sector. So it's feeling this critical gap. Something I already mentioned, that SEADS benefited a lot for this, from the previous experience of LEGS. And we have been really following the path that was indicated already, and lesson learned from LEGS. Next, please. So, why you should use SEADS? Okay. You know that most of the organization online and around the table, you have been dealing with this with crisis with an impact on crop production and in general agricultural production. And you know that millions of people, they're relying on crop production for their own livelihood. So this type of operation, they are crucial for the livelihood of the system beneficiaries. And it's extremely important to convert the available fund into efficient and well-designing operation. So SEADS assists you in the best possible programming, designing the most appropriate operation, and as I mentioned before, we guide you in order to achieve livelihood impacts for at the end of the operation, which is really the strategic direction of SEADS. Next, please. And so, who is intended for SEADS? We identify essentially two groups of people. So we think SEADS will be useful for agricultural experts that are unfamiliar with the humanitarian standards. So good technicians, not particularly familiar with the humanitarian environment, and at the same time, on the other hand, will be useful for the humanitarians that are unfamiliar with the crop production and crop-related relief operation. Next, please. Let's start now to give a look at the SEADS structure. Something important to mention is that, first of all, SEADS has been designed to cover all different types of crops. So perennial crops, annual crops, horticultural productions. And as well, SEADS has been designed for all different types of emergencies, from rapid onset to slow onset to complex emergencies. SEADS has been the objective of SEADS is to show this evidence-based, livelihood-based, and right-based approach, and this will be explained in the first section of the handbook. And so let me give you briefly recall the overall structure of the handbook. We identify you will find in the handbook essentially 3 different sections. The first section is the section which focuses on the SEADS critical concepts. This is the section for chapter 1 to chapter 3. And on chapter 3, you will find listed the principle. Then we will have the central section of the handbooks that will focus on the minimum standards, and particularly standards on initial assessment, standards on SEADS and SEADS systems, tools and equipment and non-SEADS items, and then chapter 7, crop-related infrastructure. And then at the end of the handbook, you will have this chapter 8 highlighting the impact-oriented monitoring and evaluation. Let's go briefly through the SEADS principle. Next slide, please. So we can, these are, as I mentioned, let's call it foundation SEADS principle explained in chapter 3 of the handbooks. Let's read it together. Use livelihood-based programming, as I mentioned at the beginning. Use a participatory approach in your response. Commit to preparedness and early action. Include and consider climate change in your operations, and adopting a measure to minimize the environmental impact of a humanitarian operation launch. And then, of course, to adopt a coordinated responses in coordination with other humanitarian actors. Next, please. So regarding the central section of the handbook on the minimum standards, let's, as I mentioned, these are the 5 chapters of the SEADS handbook. We are going then to analyze one by one. But what I would like to mention here is that these the development standards that have been guided by the systematic review of more than 250 crop-related relief responses that have been analyzed during the SEADS project, and as well as from the feedback of hundreds of different experts. So the proposed standards, they are really the result of a large consultation that has been performed during the SEADS project. Next one, please. So the standard will analyze for each response areas, identify response areas, some key action to perform during the implementation. We'll guide you through a list of practical steps. And in addition, you will find a good number of guidance notes that will assist you during the identification, implementation, and monitoring of the operation. Next one, please. So let's start with the first chapter of the standards, initial assessment. This is a critical, as you probably all know, this is a critical phase on which launch relief operation. It is particularly problematic as well in the crop-related agricultural sector. First of all, you will receive indication. You will find indication in this chapter on the timing when it's most appropriate to launch the assessment. The way indications on the way you should prepare your initial assessment team and the type of competences you should include inside the team. Then the SEADS Handbook will guide you through the selection of the most appropriate assessment approach, and this will guide you up to the selection of the response area. Next one, please. So SEADS and SEADS system is a critical, is definitely, if not the most important, one of the most important chapters of the handbook. Most of the humanitarian organizations engaging in operation supporting crop-related, launching crop-related response to support agricultural production, they engage in the seed sector. Again, in this chapter you will find guidance on how to organize your seeds assessment and how to plan your seed operation. You will find this chapter will guide you to the selection of the most appropriate technical option to intervene in the seed sector. Let me just mention the three options that are proposed and indicated by SEADS. So the first option is to facilitate the access to seeds using existing seed possibilities, supporting as a second option, supporting the existing seed system, and only as a third option, in-kind seed distributions. And you will see that through this process, you can select one technical option or a combination of different technical options for your operation. Then at the end that you have selected your type of operation, SEADS will assist you in the problematic, I would say, side of this type of operation. It is the selection of the varieties you are going to adopt in your operation, and as well as SEADS will guide you through a chapter exploring the question of the seeds quality that you will use in your operation. And this is not an easy matter, and it is always highly debated. Next slide, please. The chapter on tools, equipment, and non-seed inputs is following the same structure of the chapter on seeds. The type of operation that typically are covered under tools, equipment, non-seed inputs, just to clarify, because I know that is not always completely clear. In terms of tools, here we are talking about provision, for example, of hand hose, provision of jerrycans for irrigation purposes. I can think about a donkey plow, for example, or a simple plow. In terms of equipment, typically here we are talking about protective clothing if you are dealing with pesticide, water pumps, crop storage bags, fencing material. And when we see non-seed inputs, here we have an important one that is fertilizers that are most of the time included in this type of operation, organic or standard chemical fertilizer, and as well all the machinery sector, from motocultivators to the more complex tractors. And again, this chapter will give you, will guide you through the possible technical options to the different system, and then the quality of the material you can distribute. Next one, please. Crop-related infrastructure, again, just a few words explaining what we are talking here. All the infrastructure related to agricultural production. So here we are, SEADS is analyzing the rehabilitation of greenhouses, rehabilitation or construction of greenhouses, rehabilitation of construction of irrigation schemes, ponds, dams, could be silos to store the crop, warehouses. And as well as, and this is something particularly close to the ICRC modus operandi, as well, for example, the infrastructure of the different ministries of agriculture, like, for example, the research stations in the seed sector that you can rehabilitate. One word on the timing. SEADS will help you selecting the appropriate timing to rehabilitate infrastructure, and particularly the ICRC will intervene all the time in conflict situations. We know that the choice of the right timing in rehabilitating infrastructure is extremely important, because we see how frequently we see the need to rehabilitate important infrastructures in the middle of a conflict, but we cannot launch the rehabilitation because there is the risk that the rehabilitated infrastructure will be destroyed once again during the conflict. So it is, and so you have to do one step back, waiting for the right moment. So timing is a crucial point for rehabilitating infrastructure. Next slide, please. SEADS will guide you, will help you through with a list of tools. Here we have, for example, is the decision tree that you will adopt in responding in SEADS and SEADS system. No need to explain, but they are there and they're extremely useful. Next one, please. Timing table, again, I just mentioned timing. It's important to adopt this type of table because for crop-related operations, you know, we should respect the planting seasons. So it's very good that you will find this type of support and tables in the handbook. Next one, please. And then tables giving you the possibility to compare, highlighting advantages and disadvantages of the different type of technical options. Again, another useful tool. Next one, please. So last chapter, as I mentioned, chapter 8 is on impact-oriented module evaluation. Something to mention here is that this is the first example of this kind in the humanitarian HSP group. You will find inside this chapter will guide you through the whole evaluation process. You will find, I want to mention, you will find a bunch of interesting indicators that are proposed inside the handbooks, and as well you will be guided through different type of evaluation. For example, the end of project evaluation, but as well, for example, the participatory evaluation. So this chapter will guide you in this process. Something I would like to mention is that all these impact-oriented module evaluation, as I mentioned at the beginning, has been structured around the concept to measure as much as possible livelihood impacts of launched operation. Something we are exploring at present, we are developing at present inside the ICRC, is particularly for our emergency food production operations, how we should include, and we will include, the nutritional indicators. We will have in the room after a discussion on this specific point, and this could be as well a suggestion for the phase 2 of SEADS, how we can expand these the livelihood objectives, including some nutritional objectives for this type of operation. So just to conclude, how you can get the SEADS manual. If you like myself and you want to have a hard copy, you can buy one hard copy from the SEADS website. But the most easy way is to download a PDF version for free from the SEADS website as well. And if you are based in Nairobi, you can during next 2 weeks, you can approach the ICRC entrance, the reception, and you can take one SEADS copy for free. You will just need to sign a form, and you can take one. And I think that is everything from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ugo. Yeah, appreciate you giving you the grid as well as the detailed overview of the SEADS handbook, as well as, you know, telling us what it is, what are the contents, and where we can get it. I think your last slide was where we can get it. So for me, I'm excited when I heard about the nutrition objectives. That excited me a bit because I was looking at it from the, you know, all the livelihood objectives. So it's great to see that we are also considering how we maybe do the decision trees, you call them decision trees for nutrition objectives. That would be great to have. So I want to move over to the other panelists who will be telling us what SEADS means for each of their organizations and how they are expecting to use it. And to start with, I'll hand over to Loise.
Thank you so much. I will speak from an education point of view, and SEADS is part of the main humanitarian standards partnership, where interagency network for education emergencies is part of the whole thing. So by being in education and practicing minimum standards for a while, so I'm trying to looking back and looking forward on what this can mean to the humanitarian sector. And just as we have heard about the SEADS principles, about the fundamental key issues, key actions, guidance notes, and accompanying tools that have been actually well elaborated. This, of course, will help in programming and implementation, and where people will become more effective and efficient in dealing with their livelihoods. And we know that just like we have heard about the minimum standards, about SEADS, they are well prepared with the people in mind. And I think when I looked at the SEADS handbook, I think it is consumer friendly. And I think people will be very, very happy reading the handbook. I'm kind of very happy when it's a handbook rather than online. So I would encourage people to really get what it is that they would want to use. Next slide. Speaking from my own experiences about the minimum standards in education, the first question that we may need to ask is, how accessible are the minimum standards? Thank you for saying how we can get them, but sometimes we find it is very difficult for the people who are using. Who are the users? Is it the experts or is it the humanitarian actors? So which mode would be best so that they're able to understand and they're able to use it for programming inside out? So which mode is good for them? Is it online or is it hard copy? And by whom? Because I think you mentioned experts, and we also have humanitarian actors. How do we engage the minimum standards using either online or hard copy? We also have developmental actors. I think many times now we are talking about the humanitarian actors, development actors, nexus. So where do we place the SEADS, or where do we place the minimum standards, either in education or in legs or in SEADS and so on? And government departments, I think that is one of the areas that maybe we'll need to have a discussion on how the government departments comes into the minimum standards and at what point we engage. There is also where we talk about the multi-sectoral discussions on agreements, to do with all these minimum standards? What are the forums of sharing ideas and lessons? In the last 2 years, since 2020, we have been online, and I think it is now becoming a bit friendly to have a face-to-face discussions where we can exchange ideas. So what are the forums? Do the experts meet the other actors? Because sometimes we have the humanitarian actors operating on their own space. We have the experts operating on their own space, but how do we integrate our own ideas and bring the lessons learned, both good and bad? Are the minimum standards effectively utilized in programming and implementation of the programs? These are the questions that we need to ask when we start utilizing the SEADS. Are they effectively utilized? By who? When? Because we talk about the minimum standards. For example, the minimum standards in education is for preparedness, for response and recovery. When do we talk about utilization of SEADS? Would it be in preparedness, where in many circumstances we see we don't prepare, and especially when it comes to the humanitarian crisis? We are more reactive than proactive. How do we make sure that we are able to prepare and to make sure that the people, the consumer of these seeds, are able to be reached in good time and not just in times of a crisis? Next, please. I have some evidence on some research that I did in Kenya to help the interagency network in updating the minimum standards, which is an ongoing process. And I found some gaps in knowledge and usage of minimum standards among the stakeholders. And here the stakeholders, I mean even the government itself. Some local NGOs cited lack of knowledge on harmonizing organizational standards and INEE minimum standards. We all know that each and every organization has their own standards. And here now we are bringing a new standard and we are telling them that please use these standards. How do they harmonize? Because some of the people I talked to, including the directors of organizations, said it becomes very difficult when we have a foreign document and balancing between our internal practices and this foreign document that is coming to tell us about minimum standards. It become a bit difficult. So that the knowledge and usage of the minimum standards would be a key thing that we must consider. We also found them too high to be called minimum standards. So why do we call them minimum standards? At what level? I think I have this discussion over the last 10 years talking about interagency network for education emergencies minimum standards. And we always ask ourselves, why are they called minimum standards? And they are hedged on very high level of issues to do with the humanitarian law, the refugee law, and I think the human rights law, which put the expectation to be a bit high. So we didn't need to help people and the consumers of these standards to understand why do we call it minimum standards? The other thing that we also found out is that many organizations consider minimum standards in programming and implementation, citing lack of knowledge and on how to localize. How do I get the minimum standards, or how do I get the SEADS and try to use them in my local context? So the localization of the minimum standards is key. So for example, from that small research that we did, we were asking them, how do you use the minimum standards? And they say, yes, we use, but it's very difficult to contextualize, to bring the standards into our local setups, even in programming and implementation of the minimum standards. Next, please. I also did some work with the Ministry of Education through I think international IEP, UNESCO, and we were trying to look at the Ministry of Education analysis on coordination and leadership on COVID-19 in the education sector. And I think one of the key things that came is that preparedness was mentioned as a major gap. There was no preparedness. They appreciated the minimum standards, but had not been part of the education policy framework. And therefore, there was no budget. And that, of course, sets a signal. How do we engage the government so that it become part and parcel of their thinking? So that when they are coming up with the policy documents, they are able to talk about SEADS. How do we engage the government so that they talk about SEADS, they talk about the humanitarian minimum standards in their documentation? Unfortunately, the people that are engaged from the Ministry of Education, many of them could not understand what are these minimum standards, and therefore that itself is a gap within the knowledge and usage. And of course, if we lose it at the policy level, then of course we lose it at the budget level, and we lose it at the implementation and programming. So what lessons can we carry from this evidence to help the implementation of SEADS? Next, please. So my parting shot would be, how do we sensitize the government on SEADS for policy consideration, consolidation within relevant departments, and budgeting? Thank you so much.
Wow. Loise, those are great questions. I think that we need to think about as we move forward into the implementation of the SEADS manual. So many questions there related to utility, use of the manual, the handbook itself, issues related to learning, process learning, as well as knowledge sharing, knowledge management, and so many other questions that she's raised, specifically on issues related to the manual, as well as the processes of implementing it. Also questions related to government. How do we bring government on board on so many fronts that Loise has talked about? So thank you so much, Loise. I want to hand over to Morena to take us through the next slides.
Thank you, Everlyn. And talking about the point of view of the nutritionist. So ICRC implements a nutrition-sensitive program to prevent the acute malnutrition in the civilian population and also in detention, in the prisons. And one of these program is the nutrition-sensitive agricultural project. That is a food-based approach to agricultural development that puts nutritional rich foods, the dietary diversity, and the food fortification at the heart of overcoming malnutrition and micronutrients deficiencies. The targeted agricultural program can improve the nutrition through various pathways, such as to increase the food availability for the direct consumption in the community, to improve the income generation, and also to decrease the market prices, and all these activities, all these results will improve the nutrition in the civilian population. In ICRC, the agro and the livestock and nutrition teams work together to assess the needs, to design a nutrition sensitive program, and to adapt them to the reality that we find in the area where we wanted to work, and to follow the implementation and of the programs, and also to monitoring them. SEADS Handbook will be a useful support for the teams to prepare the assessment, to design the program, and to adapt them also in the specific area where we are working for the nutrition sensitive project. Next slide. When an agricultural program is transformed in a nutrition sensitive project, it is required to add the nutritional objective as a secondary goal. To achieve it, we need to follow a pathway of and to map what we have to do. In which way, how? For example, we need to assess the needs, to understand if we need to implement a program to cover the needs of micronutrients deficiencies or macronutrients deficiencies, to design the right agricultural program. So we will be able to do vegetable seeds distribution to cover the needs for the micronutrients deficiencies, and staple seeds when we wanted to increase the macronutrients intake. Then we have to determine a clear selection of for the criteria to select the beneficiaries. We need to implement the program, and then we need to monitoring the program during the implementation and also after, when the program is ended, to evaluate the objective if they have been reached or not. And also here, the SEADS Handbook can support the team in the field during the preparation of the assessment, the design of the project, and also to determine the right moment of the implementation. In effect, we saw that there is also the calendar, and to cover the specific needs for the community. And the ICRC, as I said before, implements the nutrition sensitive programs in the civilian population, but also in place of detention, because we are working in the two communities, if we wanted to call that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Morena. A very great topic, very close to my heart. Yeah. So I will hand over now to our last panelist, who is Salih. Karibu Salih.
Thank you very much. I'm as director of SO Sahel, but also I've got an opportunity to be member of SEAD steering group, although that's helped me a lot. Let me just go through SOS Sahel. SOS Sahel Sudan is a national organization, but it's quite a big organization in Sudan. Has a main office in Khartoum with 10 field offices in 7 states of Sudan. And our mission is to, our vision is peace and prosperity for all in Sudan, and our mission to support women and men in Sudan to realize their potential, their rights, and their sustainable livelihood and balanced ecosystem. We implement projects funded by different donors, mainly EU, Norwegian embassy in Sudan, the NORAD, and also from the Dutch government, and projects from UN agencies. Our main UN partners, UNDP, FAO, and UN Environment. Also, we implement projects in consortium and partnership with international NGOs, and our main partners, NCA, ZOA, Practical Action, Plan Sudan, Save the Children International, and Danish Muslim Aid. This is our main donor and partners. The way of our work is we implement directly. We have over 100 staff members, core staff, and project-based stuff, but also we implement project in consortium with international NGOs. And that is one of the good things, that we add our knowledge of the local context, and also we learn from the international global experience of the international organization. That's helped us a lot on working together with others and implementing different projects. Next, please. Our geographical coverage is, as seen here, we cover 7 states of Sudan, and our main themes are natural resource, focusing on water, and pasture and range and pasture. And we have a livelihood with focus on agriculture and livestock, and we build capacity of local communities focusing on CBOs. Next. Our experience before, we implemented several agricultural projects. One of them is the 3-year project, Sustainable Integrated Development Approach. And this project is funded by SEADS, Swedish, and implemented in a consortium with ZOA and World Relief. The project is aiming to increase sustainable agricultural productivity and improve food security of target community. Of course, this project is before SEADS, and the evaluation of the project reflected a good outcome of it, but also pointed out that it's getting difficulties to get indicators for impact. So the project design now in the future, we consider SEADS to, from the designing stage and implementation stage, start to consider the impact-oriented related. Next. Also, we implemented the project in enhancing community resilience, and this project in consortium or partnership with ZOA and funded by Tier Fund. We focus on training farmers on agricultural practice, establishment of seed banks, and distribution of seed package. Also, as the previous project, we focus on seed and tools and training farmers on agriculture, but still the project design was missing some element of impact indicators. Next. Why seed is important to me? And as I mentioned, our previous agricultural projects designed to secure farmers' access to inputs without considering the impact of this on the livelihood of the people. And as member of SEAD, I brought experience from our previous experience and challenges facing crop-related response to the process. And also, I learned from SEAD process how to design and implement an impact-based related projects. Next. Why SEAD is important? Yes, continue. I found SEAD very unique in helping the user to measure livelihood impact. And also, as in my capacity as a director of SOS Sahel in Sudan, I will support my team, my staff, and provide all the good environment for them to implement SEADS, to read and to understand SEADS and how to implement it. And as SOS Sahel, we have also, we will promote SEADS through our networks. We are member of food security and livelihood sectors and member of NGO forums in Sudan and other networks. This all will help us to promote SEADS and encourage the humanitarian actors to use SEADS. Next. Emergency situation in Sudan. While the chronic drought continuing on all the Sahelian belt of Africa, and Sudan is as part of it, also we're facing a lot of displaced people, conflict displaced people. We have refugees from South Sudan, from Ethiopia. So in total, the number of needy people that humanitarian actors responding to them is very big. This year, humanitarian actors managed to respond to 9.1 million people in need. And just yesterday, the UN humanitarian coordinator with the humanitarian actors, they launched the 2023 humanitarian response plan. And the estimated needed people is 12.5. So that's the needed people is increased. I found SEADS easy to understand and to use, and I will support TOT in country level to promote use of SEAD. And as I mentioned again, with our network, I will help in promoting SEADS, and I consider all the issues about how to use standard. And I think SEAD is a real addition to the other minimum standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Salih, again for especially spelling out why and how you plan to use the SEADS handbook. So we are going to the next session of question and answer. And before, sorry?
No, I thought.
Okay.
Okay,
we don't.
Yeah.
Okay, you go ahead.
Thank you. Just, I would like to bring the Lex point of view on this. And I think that SEADS is a significant step toward the harmonization of assistance intervention in humanitarian context. It would be really, I mean, is the kind of additional piece of the big puzzle of humanitarian assistance, and for such a relevant field like agriculture. So it's very important. And being a Lex user, I already see in which way it could be important. Important for improving the quality of the intervention from the conception, design, implementation, and then there is all these infrastructures also aspect for agriculture. And also very important to improve the dialogue among the different stakeholders, because we have, as was already highlighted, we have expert, not expert, NGOs, implementing agencies, ministries, donors. So this gives common point of reference to deal with, and then is really helpful for this. Now has been in the launch, so as to be understood, as to be digested by the users, and then will all these will lead to a better ownership of the contents. And then I think that the dissemination, mobilization process is very important to reduce these gaps of understanding of knowledge that were highlighted. So I mean, I see already thinking as a Lex, I see the positive impact on this, on the people, or all those working in humanitarians, and ultimately, I mean, this is the most important for the people affected by the humanitarian crisis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Guido Govoni, the regional livestock specialist with ICRC. And thank you for adding in that point on how you see the relation, being a Lex user, how you see that relate to the SEADS standards. So thank you so much, Pierre. And sorry for...
No, it was not planned actually.
Yeah.
Thinking that these and so I say let's bring the Lex perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So we are going to the next session, which is the Q&A, question and answer. And before I open it up for the audience to ask your questions, I would still encourage you to put your questions on the Q&A. We've just heard from all the panelists, and I want to ask a few questions to the panelists. And you know, we've had their presentations and we've had them talk about the necessary minimum standards like SEADS, the SEADS are, but I also know that it can be challenging to go from conceptually understanding the standards and really using them, as was articulated very well by Loise. So while I have very many different questions for you all, I am going to focus on first trying to understand a bit better from your perspective how different actors can use the standards well. And so I'll start with Ugo. As you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, SEADS development has been an effort with the involvement of so many people, as well as dozens of organizations around the world. And I can imagine how different organizations with specific mandates, different mandates, and how difficult it was to combine the nature of the different organizations with their different mandates to participate in this process. So how does this diversity of mandates mean, or what does it mean now as organizations around the world start to use the handbook or the standards?
Thank you very much, Everlyn, for this question. Yes, it's true. This has been an effort combining together, putting together organization with a different, extremely different DNA, I would say, and an original mandate. And particularly, you can consider that as ICRC, we are operating in conflict areas, and what emerged during the 2 years of developing this tool, working with the other organization, is that, for example, we realized that as a frontline organization, we were having a different perception around the concept of emergency. So for us, emergency is something that is bringing us to implement operation in the very short term, most of the time, and we consider so a short time frame in front of us to implement relief operation. While for other organizations, they were more oriented on medium long term type of answer. And we confronted ourselves a lot during the development seat. And I think that we managed to combine both type of approach during the operation. And this is just one of the differences has emerged during the development of SEADS. Anyway, as I mentioned, we are different, a list of organizations with different mandates, with different measures, but I have the impression we managed to combine all the input for the different organizations inside this manual. Of course, we really hope to have a phase 2 and a phase 3, and we will continue to develop the manual, including even more, if possible, the different inputs coming from such a long list of different organizations. But just concluding, I would like to see, I consider this a positive factor, that we have different organizations participating into the manual instead of a problem.
Great. Thank you. Loise, you mentioned a lot of in your presentation, bringing in the government on this discussion. And I would like to ask you how you see how the minimum standards, how you see the, the minimum standards helping the government to improve in mitigating some of the gaps, and especially in the crisis context.
Thank you so much for that question. First and foremost, we know that the government is a duty bearer, both at the humanitarian level and the development level, and therefore the government needs to understand the both sectors. And sometimes we find like some governments are not prepared enough to handle some of the issues surrounding humanitarian sector. They are caught off guard. And in such circumstances, we really need rigorous trainings and advocacy meetings to bring the minimum standards into the level where the government can understand them and where they can play a key role in policy formulation, policy design, policy implementation, budgeting frameworks, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, sometimes if we don't deal with the government, then many of the gaps that we find in the humanitarian sector and also in the development sector that are not answering to the needs of the consumers. Sometimes it's not the laxity of the government. Sometimes it's because there are some knowledge gaps. And therefore there is a lot of urgency in terms of what we can do as experts or humanitarian actors to engage the government to bring the understanding of the SEADS, the understanding of the humanitarian minimum standards into their doors, into their thinking, so that they are able to think at the policy level, and that will trickle down to the departments that are handling some of the key areas in both humanitarian and development actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Loise. I want to talk a little bit about organizational leadership, Salih, and as the Director General of a humanitarian organization, how will SEADS help you to decide whether to go for or not for a crop-related intervention?
Okay, thank you. SEAD has now become member of the minimum standards. Usually for NGOs implementing or engaging on humanitarian response, we consider all the minimum standards as one of our friends on when trying to design a project or implement. But now SEADS, and as I am a steering committee member, I've got SEAD is really helpful on guiding on decision making. And I was a practitioner. I've been on the humanitarian response for 30 years. Usually most of the problem with the crop-related intervention that we implement the wrong project, not suitable to the people. But SEAD will help you to decide earlier, is this suitable for those people or not? So is it suitable to go for it or not? So immediately you can leave it and go for another intervention who appropriate to the people. SEAD allow you to determine the crop-related intervention as appropriate, visible, and suitable for, as I said, to these people. Help the user to prioritize. Even within the crop-related, you can prioritize the response. And in SEAD, when you read, and for the user is to read chapter 1 to 3, that will be very helpful to allow you to implement an effective, because crop-related or an impact-related project, unless you consider it from the designing stage, then you're going to in different direction. So SEAD will help you from the designing stage that you design an impact-oriented project. Chapter 4 in SEAD will help you more to go for initial assessment. And initial assessment, as mentioned by Ugo in the presentation, they have good tools to help you for the participation and so on. So in that whole context, I think SEAD is really very helpful. I will encourage all the humanitarian actors to use SEAD and to be as a friend book in their offices.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more question for Morena. I know time is moving quite fast. We only have 15 minutes. But one question for you, Morena. How can the SEADS handbook be useful to a nutritionist like myself and maybe others on the call that want to design a nutrition-sensitive agriculture program?
So as been showed by Ugo and in the slides, the SEADS handbook is a very friendly handbook to be used. So I think that is well designed to guide a non-agriculture agronomist specialist as me and you to prepare an assessment, to prepare a design of the project, to decide which kind of seeds can be distributed, when, because there is the calendar. So I think that it can be very useful also for who is not an agronomist. Maybe more for us than for them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know we are running out of time, so thank you so much, Morena, for that response. We are running out of time, so I want to open it up for a few questions from the participants. There's quite a number that have been posted already, and so I'll read a few. We will do that for the next maybe 5 minutes, and then you know, get to the next session. So our first question is from Shadi Dakel, and I'll give this question to Ugo. If you could answer for us, who is considered eligible, qualified to contribute to the participatory approach? Is that local population, authorities, or technicians?
Listen, I would say everybody with the preference to the assisted population, so the representative of the assisted population. But in general, the most you open, the group of people consulted in a process, you can get a better idea on what is in front of you. But of course, to me, giving the preference as a first priority group by the assisted population.
Okay, so there was a question asked about LEDs and SEADS, and I know you talked a little bit about it, Guido, so maybe you can respond to that. So someone asked about you know, whether we can consider both legs and
which is the question that SEAD consider also for SEAD in emergency situation. How can SEAD design farming technique for farmers living?
Okay, maybe as we look again for that question.
More specifically.
Yeah, there was a question there, but as we consider that one, maybe we can go to the next one in terms of how does SEADS closely track and guide alignment of projects, implementing crop-related interventions with a set minimum standards. Do you want to take that, Salih?
The first one.
How does SEADS closely track and guide alignment of projects implementing crop-related interventions with a set minimum standards?
Yeah, yes. SEADS as dealing with the crop-related, many projects also integrated. We implemented integrated projects with the rural people. Sometimes you consider other needs as well, not only agriculture, but SEADS will help you to link when an integrated project, look for that, the component related to the crop-related project, that SEAD will guide you. But also the SEAD guidelines will help you on decision-making, especially when you're going to the decision-making tree, that will help you either to go for SEAD or not, or to integrate SEAD to the other activities. So it's a good start.
Okay. Thank you. There's another question there on procurement of seeds and how can seed standards be applied during procurement of seeds from suppliers whereby an organization may have no control over the market where the seeds are produced. Ugo?
Yes, well, as I mentioned during my presentation, seeds, the intervention in the seeds sector on the seed system is probably the most important and voluminous one, and is where even the discussion during the development of this manual has been quite important. So how we can support an organization that is not having control on the seeds market? I think seeds is giving a number of indication on how to select the best approach in this sense. We cannot actually solve all the problems related to seeds procurement in the field. We know that in most of the areas where usually humanitarian are implementing relief operation in the seed sector, they are confronted with seeds private sector and usually as well the seeds public infrastructure that is devoted to the development of the new varieties that have been affected by a conflict or by a natural disaster, by difficult situations. So the only real suggestion I can give, following a bit of its indication, is that to be present before the crisis inside the country, to establish good link with the ministries in the country where we are going to intervene at the second stage, and in order not to be in the position to organize everything from scratch the day of the disaster or the day of the crisis. I think to answer this question is really relevant the effort that SEADS is suggesting to do in preparedness in order to have this type of contacts at national level already established in order to have a smooth launch of the operation.
Yeah,
yes.
Thank you. I know we are running out of time, so I'll take one more question. Matters Food are open to government policies and controls. Are there deliberate actions or tips in SEADS to engage the government and national agricultural institutions? And I know this is something that Loise was talking about in terms of engaging the government. So maybe I don't know what your final comments would be on this.
Thank you for that question. It's not an easy question, and especially when we talk about government controls. As we have said, the government has the mandate in policies and making decisions. And therefore, if the government really can engage all institutions, and I think this is, since SEAD is a new way of thinking in terms of agriculture, in terms of livestock, I think the government would be a key stakeholder to be targeted, and all the other organizations, so that they can come together and think together, so that they can come up with policies that are not limiting other organizations in terms of programming and implementation. I may not have answered in the best way, but I think there is need for the government to talk to the other key stakeholders.
Sure. Thank you, Loise. I know there's many other questions here, some related to the SEADS manual itself. So I would encourage all of us to just go back and look at it. We got quite some highlights from Ugo. So please look at those and delve into the manual itself now that we have it, so that you can get more information on what the manual can and cannot do. In the same length, there's many questions related to the use of the manual in terms of dissemination and learning from it. So I think we will get to that maybe as we start using the manual to see, what comes of it and how we can share some of these learnings from the SEADS manual. So I will end it there and ask that you all help us with the MND for this manual. And since we all know that evidence is important, and we wanted to launch a poll so that we can all participate on that poll. So Anne, if you could help us launch the poll so that we all can participate. So please answer those two questions. We have two questions there. If you can put your answer to those two questions, that will help us in terms of knowing what next. So just 1 minute to look at the use, whether it's you're likely to use, your organization or yourself are likely to use the manual, the handbook, and why. Maybe a short answer in terms of just saying the why. Okay. To take like maybe 1 minute. Yeah. Keep your polls coming, your answers coming. How likely are you or your organization to use SEADS? Mhm.
It's easy for participants to click it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm waiting for the poll to see what the responses are.
I think
I don't know
I'll
how-
end it now, okay?
Okay. Okay, lovely. Great to see that many of you are likely, extremely likely, and likely to use this SEADS handbook. So I know there's many responses there on the why, so we will look at those later because they guide us on the next steps. So I'm excited to see that many of you are likely and unlikely, and likely actually to use the manual. So let's keep using it. We were given where to find it. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for your participation. And I hope that you will use the SEADS handbook as well as the standards, and that you'll encourage other colleagues also and your team members, your organizations to use it. As Ugo mentioned, you can get the SEADS in a variety of ways for free. And this is available on the SEADS website. So please, as soon as you Google it, actually it comes up, so you can get it there. You can also pass by the ICRC offices here, and there's a box of books at the reception here in Nairobi, if you're in Nairobi. So ICRC offices are on Ngesha Road off Lower Kabete Road, just in front of the FAO Somalia offices. So if you're here, just pass by and pick a copy for yourself. Please pick one per organization and make sure you sign sheet that is available at the reception. So with that, I just want to thank you again for attending this call, and thank you so much, and have yourself a lovely day. And thank you, panelists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.